Well, thank you for those of you who are joining us live or virtual. My name is Daniel Herman. I'm a partner marketing manager here at Alation, and I'm really happy to welcome you to our Data Culture Maturity Journey webinar. It's going to be a great opportunity for you to learn about, the progressive path to establish, robust data leadership and other great involvements in data culture, data governance. We're hosted by Data Meaning and Alation, and that leads me to introducing our speakers for today. We have Salvador Baragan, and who is the Director of Data Governance at Data Meaning. We also have Aaron Bradshaw, who is the Staff Customer Engagement Manager for Alation. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Sal, and let the people hear what they came to hear.
Thank you, Daniel. So, hi, everyone. My name is Salvador Baragan. As Dan mentioned, I am the Director of Data Governance here at Data Meaning. So my role really is to build out data governance programs for organizations around different technologies to support them in their data governance and maturity journeys. So today we have a jam-packed agenda. We've done a short introduction. We're going to dive right into what is data maturity. After that, Aaron is going to speak on maturity assessments in general, what those maturity assessments look like, the classical ones like DCAM, DGI, DAMA, et cetera. And then we're going to dive into Alation's data maturity model. We're really excited about this model. We're starting to introduce this model, and we're excited in terms of it's a different approach in terms of how we're going to be doing data, both maturity and governance as we move forward. So he's going to introduce that model. I'm going to speak to each of the areas around that model: leadership, literacy, discovery, and governance. We're going to talk a little bit. Aaron will then talk a little bit about a success story already that Alation has occurred with Alation, and then we'll talk about what next steps look like in terms of what you need to do, what you can do now, and how we can assist you on that journey. So with no further ado, let's start this presentation. So I want to start with a quote here. The most successful businesses base their decisions on data rather than drama. A leader's job is to champion the science-driven mindset throughout their organization. Now, what is this things I think we could draw from this? One is the obvious, that you want to move away from what we call gut reactions in order to a science-driven decision-making mindset. That's wonderful. However, in order to get there, you really have to level out and bring the level of maturity of your organization to such a point that they can actually use data to derive and to develop those decision-making, science-driven, that mindset. Without that maturity improvement, an organization will still devolve into one that uses gut instincts, one that uses, my opinion, et cetera, et cetera. So really this saying, really, I like it because it tells us, hey, this is the place we want to be, but to get there, we really need to improve our maturity. We really need to look at maturity, not just from a governance standpoint, because a lot of times when we look at data, it's about governance or analytics governance or something to that effect, but really holistically around leadership, around literacy, and around how we discover data and then how we use that data. So very quickly, improving data maturity, I think it consists of three things, really. It consists of understanding and using a maturity model that's effective, having that curiosity in the organization around data. Without that curiosity, it's really difficult to start any journey, because if you're not curious, you don't want to discover something, you don't want to improve on something, it's very difficult to start anything. And then from a business standpoint, we really got to understand what the impact is to the business. So being able to take a model, being able to take what the ideas are and what the projects are going to be and align them with the impact of your business, I think is critical in order to ensure success as you move forward. So data maturity is a journey that really requires that cultural shift towards valuing evidence, reason over opinion, and enabling organizations to make those data-driven decisions to better achieve those outcomes that you're looking to achieve. So in order to do that, a strong model, curiosity, and how is that going to impact your business? So challenges. So there's going to be challenges on any journey, and anybody who's gone down already like data governance journeys knows what those challenges are. The first thing that comes to mind, and what I've experienced in my career, has been the resistance from an organization itself, from different departments, et cetera. And many times it's cultural, because obviously an organization, as it evolves, it always develops a culture. Every organization has a unique culture. They're not the same. You can be in the same industry, but every organization is made up of different people. Therefore, that culture is going to be different. Different people bring different ideas, et cetera, different backgrounds. So what I've seen in my career is that you're gonna meet that resistance regardless, because people kind of are always they push back to anything new or change in itself. There's always resistance to that. So one of the things we have to emphasize is that you're going to meet that resistance, and you're going to have to emphasize leadership and understand where people are currently in that journey. Understand their illiteracy. What do they understand about data and how it improves both their job and what the company in general is trying to achieve. So the other challenge is limited resources. So let's face it, budgets are tight. For me, they've always been tight, but so being very both adaptable, flexible, but creative with your resources is something you want to get good at. Because it's going to be a challenge, because if you say you have a project, you want to bring in a catalog, but the catalog costs whatever, 100, 200, whatever budget, and it's outside your budget. How do you get around that? How do you sell the program in order to, for example, in this case, get the technology required? But what happens if you can't get the technology? Can you still do something without that technology until you get those resources and prove out that business case for it? And so those are some of the things you have to think about when you're dealing with limited resources. Is what can you do in this journey that does not truly cost money? It will cost time, but not immediate impact to your budget. And the other one is the challenge is data silos. Anybody who's worked on any program with being at developing search engines, or a data catalog or business glossary or anything or metadata catalog, understands that people tend to have the belief that data is, first of all, that they own it, which is partially true. However, they they own it personally before the company does, which is not true. And that's where we get problems, because sometimes people don't want to share their data because they feel that they're using it, they're managing it, and therefore why do they have to share it? So that's part of the cultural resistance anybody's gonna meet on this journey, is how do you break that silo? And that takes both leadership, a literacy component of understanding the fluidity of data and how data is ubiquitous. Also, it requires how breaking down those silos is going to improve your ROI. It's going to improve that return both on the investments you make on technology, but also the investments of time. So overcoming these common challenges throughout that process is going to require communications, cross-functional alignment to ensure that maturity success as you move forward. So some of the value around data maturity, one is, and see, these are I believe not only they become common, but they become standards now in terms of what you want to present as the value you're bringing to this journey that you're on. So one is, and some people are going to hate to hear this, but one is increased revenue. Why? Because we're in business to make money. If your organization is dependent on revenue to stay afloat, they're going to want to see how this is aligned to increasing revenue. So data-driven decisions that optimize both operational and revenue-creating opportunities are going to be primordial in your organization. Second is, how do you enhance your customer service by leveraging those insights? So that's really important in terms of both from a revenue and from a business standpoint, is how are you going to improve your customer service? And improving that insight into your data, the discovery of your data, and therefore the improvement of the quality, et cetera, of that data is going to improve getting those insights more exact. So the next is improving those operational efficiencies by streamlining. So once you've put in a program and you start maturing it and you start improving it, both from a policy standpoint, governance standpoint, a process standpoint, you're streamlining how long it takes you to make a decision, and therefore it increases your efficiencies, not only operationally, but across the whole gambit of your organization. So fourth, boosted profitability through a data-enabled cost optimization, revenue generation. So this falls in line with the first three, is that profitability is going to go up as you're optimizing those processes. As you're increasing those and improving those, you're going to really generate more revenue by cutting costs across your organization. And then the cultural shift, as people value what they see with data in terms of the empirical empirical reality that data brings in terms of their decision making, it's going to really bring more value to the projects and to the processes that have been developed, the maturity programs, the literacy programs, and the leadership around that, as opposed to someone saying, "Hey, I could have done this just by my gut instinct." That's that you want to avoid that by really improving it and moving the cultural shift over to that evidence-based decision making. And then finally, fostering a data-driven mindset across your organization for sustainable growth. This really is an outcome of really the top five. Really, that mindset will be across your organization once you have achieved all of those above, both the cultural shift, improved operational efficiencies, enhancing customer service, et cetera, through a maturity process and really trip that you're going to take on as you move forward in this whole journey. So the next sections, we're going to discuss maturity assessments very quickly. So Aaron Bradshaw from Alation is going to go through these. And he's going to explain what these look like, maybe a little bit about the differences between them and why Alation is different in this context. Take it away, Aaron.
Thank you, Sal. So yeah, ultimately, anybody who's worked in kind of the data space for any amount of time will probably have done some type of data maturity assessment, whether that's something from DCAM, whether it's from anyone else across over the past few decades. I guess at a high level, one of the big things that we see differently within Alation has been that there are kind of a number of things that kind of we've observed as difficulties with the kind of the wider data maturity assessments. Can we go to the next slide, please? So if we look at all of these, I think the main bullet point here to echo Sal's previous point is that all analysts link the higher maturity to leading on monetization. So whether you want to talk about money or not, that's it. The reality is that we want to advocate for increased data management, data culture, and money talks realistically. And ultimately, the facts are 7 times more likely to increase revenue, more likely to increase your growth, more likely to retain your customer base, and so on from there. The main reasons why everybody does them, benchmarking by sector, understanding where you are, using those to drive strategies and awareness and things. And then, of course, ultimately trying to go away and lock down resource and funding to deliver some long-term initiatives as well. Obviously, the flip side to the high monetization and customer retention and so on is that the organizations who have been deemed to have low maturity have been linked to having ultimately being at a competitive disadvantage. So obviously in this space where the economy's tight and so on from there, it's not even about you want to be necessarily the leader, it's you don't want to be left behind. And obviously we've seen that across the organizations globally over the past decade. Companies which used to thrive are in survive mode ultimately. But what we can see on the right-hand side is that most of these maturity assessments are data management maturity assessments, and that's kind of a subtle difference to all of these types of assessments and the way that Alation sees things. So you'll see that with most of these assessments, you get 100, 200, 250 questions, and they're really thorough, low-level, granular, detailed questions around what's your architecture like? Do you have stewardship routines? Do you have a people, process, technology for all of these capabilities effectively? So they are incredibly thorough. But a few weeks ago, Sal and myself were having a conversation, and the reality that we've seen over the past 15 plus years has been you find a lot of low-level detail from your core IT and data management teams around what the problems are, but it's incredibly difficult to go back to people and say, this is the problem, and this is why we're going to get a better business outcome by improving these routines. And then the other side to that is the reality is that outside of data management and IT teams, trying to get somebody in a finance team or a product team or a marketing team to go away and complete a 250 question assessment of data management is incredibly difficult. So if we could go to the next slide, please, Sal. So as ultimately as we can see, so the reality is that they become difficult to turn into tangible outcome-based delivery. And this is where Alation's approach differs. So Alation has brought out what we call the data culture maturity model. And the key word there is culture. And Sal mentioned culture a few times when he was going through the various levels of maturity. the key thing of our maturity model is that it is 20 questions. They are focused on culture. So they aren't low-level granular details around how well do you have reference data managed in the organization. They are questions around what can people find data policies within the governance space? How easy is it for people in the organization to find data? How literate is your entire workforce? Can they find data, understand it, use it themselves, and so on from there? And of course, do you have leadership who are completely bought into a wider data delivery and data being used for those business outcomes that Sal alluded to before earlier as well? So again, the main approach of Alation is that we want to be clear, concise, complete, and ultimately be able to turn into practice to be able to deliver something tangible in timeframes. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go through this one. People will be pleased to know, otherwise we'll be here for the next 5 hours. But this just ultimately gives that breakdown of the different types of maturity models that are on the market, and ultimately just that summation of the different types of capabilities that they assess against. So you can just see that there are a myriad of different maturity models out there. They can be valuable, they can help you understand your strengths and weaknesses, but what we observe is that time and time again, they are only used by the data management team, so they aren't used to drive business outcomes across an organization. And from there, I believe I'm passing back to you, Sal.
Thank you, Aaron. So real quickly, as Aaron alluded to, so all these maturity models are actually, they're very good. They have their point to them, and there's no, we're not trying to say that they don't have value. As Aaron pointed out, they do have value. However, the approach that Alation takes and that Data Meaning is using with Alation is that we're looking at this more holistically, more from a macro perspective, where we're bringing in the leadership. We're looking at the literacy, the personas that people take within an organization, and how they use data. And how that brings and drives outcomes. So that really, in essence, is what I would say is the key difference. This next section, Aaron is going to highlight and look at the Alation data maturity and the model itself, and then I'm going to go into each of the different areas of that maturity model.
Thank you.
And Aaron.
Sure. So as we kind of alluded to, the key themes here is that we have 20 questions, 4 questions in each discipline or our pillar. So the 4 pillars: data leadership, which we believe is massively important. So if leadership aren't truly bought in, so how many organizations today now talk about having a data-driven culture or data being the new oil and so on? We want to see that is actually kind of being observed in the organization, and that leads into, do you have the correct executive sponsors? Do you have a change management and change program there? Do you have processes around how to educate, train, get people aware of new processes, new data, and how to use it, and so on from there? And are the leadership bought into transforming business objectives to data objectives, to use data technologies like Alation and other tools to go away and then achieve those business outcomes as well? Search and discovery, obviously data cataloging, we have to talk about search and discovery. One of the biggest classic blockers for analysts, data scientists has always been, what data exists? Can I use it? Do I understand it? Can I trust it? And all of those things. So the search and discovery pillar just really focuses on those core questions around how can people find data? And then from there, kind of building on the search and discovery piece, can I find data? The next section of data literacy then turns into, how well do people in the organization have the confidence to actually go away and answer the questions with the data that they've now found? So this is understanding, do you have skills matrices to understand what types of people need what types of skills? Do you have a self-service analytics program, in which case what type of skill sets would they need, and so on? Understanding, so again, if you have a skills matrix, what type of capabilities would they need? What training programs do you have, whether internally, and if externally, what budget needs to be made available? What's the team spend on average to be able to send people on training courses to upskill, and so on from there as well? And then user community. So again, fitting into the culture thing, we believe that if people have, whether internal or external user communities, and these can be Alation centric, they can be governance centric, or they can be Dharma forums and things such as that, just to talk about best practices, whether with internal colleagues, or as I mentioned, kind of multi-sector or from external organizations as well. And then, of course, finally, data governance. We almost synonymous with a lot of people now. Cataloging and governance almost go hand in hand. So talking around, again, the people, the process, the roles, responsibilities, framework. How do people find policies? How are policies applied to data? What documentation exists, and all of those types of things. So really, truly trying to understand, just from those 20 questions, the shape of the organization as it is today.
Thank you, Aaron. So I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into each of these 4 areas. As Aaron has mentioned, what these 4 areas represent, they're the core of the Alation's data maturity model. And so we believe this approach is really harnesses that whole holistic area that we believe will drive business outcomes, business results faster, more concretely, and improve businesses better in terms of decision making around science-based decisions on data. So the 4 pillars, as Aaron has already discussed, is data leadership. Obviously, promoting that throughout an organization is really key. It's probably number 1. If there's no leadership behind this, you're probably not going to get this off the ground. So really aligning those initiatives with the priorities of your organization is crucial. Data literacy, fostering literacy through targeting personas, training, etc., around the key people, both that are going to use data on a daily basis, but also maybe don't use data as often, but that also need to understand why the data is being used, because having them as part of your journey will also improve the outcomes as you move forward. And then obviously the search and discovery, being able to curate your data, having a tool or tools that give you that capability is only going to improve your program. So the speed to use of your data, both using it and the quality of it, are crucial in that step. And then obviously data governance. It's become a sort of a boogeyman these days because nobody likes governance per se, but really it's if governance is aligned with these 3 and provides those roles, responsibilities, the policies and the policies that are required to govern those areas, and the people that are making those decisions, that can only improve the whole maturity journey that you're going to take. So data maturity steps. So we've tried to break this down into the least amount of steps as possible. So as you move forward, you can get more traction and more ROI from the data maturity model and from your journey. So first is benchmarking data management practices against industry standards. How are you going to benchmark them? What industry standards are you going to use to do both your assessments? In this case, we would obviously use Alation's data maturity assessment, but you can also use other assessments if you feel that that's required. So if you feel you need to get a little bit deeper, you may want to bring in a DAM or a DCAM or a DGI or an IBM, et cetera, to really shore up some of those areas as you discover from your assessment, using Alation's model that, hey, maybe this area we need to dive in a little bit deeper here on maybe roles, or maybe a policy around a retention, or a policy around access. So those are the things that you want to discover in that first step. The second is, once you've identified the strengths, those weaknesses and gaps, you start really working towards how you're going to address them through your leadership, your literacy, and your governance program. So that first step gives you that current state, and then the second step, really, you're analyzing what those gaps may be and how you're going to address those. The third is you're going to create a data strategy based upon what you've discovered. So making sure that that's aligned with the business objectives is probably your number 1 priority. I've seen people create a data strategy where it was not aligned with the business, not aligned with the objectives of the business, and what the profit motive and what products really were driving profit. And it would die on a vine because it was not aligned. That misalignment is crucial. So when you're developing that strategy, you really want to develop it in such a way that people that drive business strategy are going to actually look at this strategy and say, okay, we agree with it. So getting actually that sign off at those high levels is probably crucial for step 3 to be successful. Step 4 is understanding how you're going to measure progress. So without statistically measuring something, you can't improve it. So that's as simple as that. When you develop those KPIs, is around how is success going to be measured. Step 5 is change management. So as we've discussed, one of the headwinds you're going to reach is that culture that's within an organization that may not want change. So what is that change management program going to look like in order to overcome those impediments? How are you going to bring those people along, or those departments that may provide you resistance? So that's the key to step 5. And then step 6 is regular reviewing and adjusting that strategy based upon what you learn. So nothing is static. So everything is about being adaptable to a situation that is requiring you to adapt. Not being, stuck in time, or being dogmatic to such a point that you can't change. So once your strategy and your change management is in effect, and you discover, hey, this is not working, that's when you definitely want to constantly review, but that's when you definitely would review and adjust accordingly, because that's going to happen. And then step 7 is you want to celebrate the successes you do have. You don't want to get burned out because as you're driving this through, burnout is something that you're gonna confront. And so to get around that, you definitely want to be able to have a little bit of a celebration when you do have success as you move forward. So let's dive into data leadership really quickly. And we've already alluded to all of these, but these are some of the essentials around leadership. As one, that executive sponsorship, making sure that you have that. Making sure that you're aligned with actual business outcomes that are going to achieve higher revenue. They're going to achieve those goals that the organization is looking for. Ensuring that your change management program has what it needs to have in order for it to address those impediments that you've discovered throughout the journey. Making sure that data literacy is paramount on the leader's desk. So you're going to have to invest time in this. This is a crucial area, because this is really going to drive your training as you move forward. It's going to drive what the gaps may be in terms of what people's understandings are and where they need to be. And then aligning those with, as I mentioned before, business value and ROI. Those have to be the focus, both from a metric standpoint and for how you're going to measure success. And then obviously your training communications, developing training really around personas, because you don't want a one training fits all. I think that's another problem that we noticed. You really have to drive it to user personas, and seeing what kinds of user personas you have, and what kind of training you're going to need for those personas. Nobody wants to go in for a training if they're an HR system or data, and you've kind of white label a training for finance because they're dealing with financial models, and you're trying to fit that in. That's the worst thing you want to do. So definitely really fitting that training according to your personas that you have in your organization. Let's dive quickly into data literacy. So data literacy, you really, as we've said this already 3 or 4 times, is linking the data usage to the business outcomes. So, well, how do you do that? So you do that by first understanding your personas and their needs. Why? Because they're the ones that are going to drive data usage, specifically the personas and the people that use data the most, that are driving growth in your organization, or driving the outcomes of your organization at a revenue level. So those are going to be really crucial in terms of tying both the value and the literacy component together. And then once you know that, you'll be able to then derive what's the skills and training those people are going to need in order to be successful. So once you understand what those outcomes are, you understand what personas have the highest effect on them, you pretty much can fit a training program really designed around that. So that's crucial when you're tying business value and literacy in this journey. So very quickly, what does a journey look like? And this in no means is a absolute, rule is step 1 and step 2. This is just some guidelines in terms of what you may look at, but this can be very different depending on your organization. But step 1 is creating a glossary for consistent terminology is something that is essential. Without that common language, it becomes difficult. Now, I'm not saying this is a data catalog. I'm talking about more general business terms that everyone understands what those definitions are. It's crucial so that you're speaking the same language. Step 2 is establishing the program around the roles and personas that you truly are addressing that have the highest impact. Eventually, you want to address everybody in an organization, but you're going to start out with the most impactful, and you really want to develop your training program around each of those personas. Now that will end up being sort of a template for the rest of your training as you move forward and you develop those in time. And that's where that's where you should want to start. Step 3 is really launching communities of practice, or sometimes referred to as centers of excellence. So these are really important because they allow that sharing component to occur. You really want to enable that sharing in your organization, the exchange of knowledge and information, because without that, your growth won't be as I would say spectacular as it could be. Step 4 is roll out tools that are going to enable this. So you can develop programs without tools, but eventually you're going to hit a roadblock where you're going to need tools really to fast track your program and really to allow your program to grow beyond where it can if you did not have tools. So that is going to be essential there. Things like data catalogs, search engines, et cetera, are keys to this step. Step 5 is putting together the metrics that are going to allow you both to measure your program and to, if you're required for auditing purposes, to really audit that program and to really improve it as you move forward. And then integrating that data literacy into performance evaluations. Nothing's worse than having to do something and it's not part of your performance, that it's not being reviewed, even though it could end up being the majority of what your work is around. So making sure that once you've developed this, that you work with HR to develop that and put those into people's performances is really crucial in terms of the long-term success. So very quickly on developing a literacy program, these are just three areas that can be key for your organization. Is preparation of the program, ensuring that you have effective communication and understanding of what you're trying to deliver, engaging with communities, hosting events, spotlighting different use cases, encouraging the adoption of data-driven practices is really a key part of this. It really will help you not only engage, but ensure that you'll be successful with different groups in your organizations. And then conducting skills enhancements, be it through regular training sessions, developing training sessions around personas, continuous learning, learning centers, et cetera. This improves data literacy and improves the culture. And the heart and soul of what this program is about is really changing that culture into something, into that science-driven approach for decision making as you move forward. So data discovery really is driven around around technology. I would say that's going to play a big role. There's no doubt about it. Understanding the capabilities that you currently have, understanding what data is important to you, making sure that that data is valued, that it's curated, that the quality of that data meets the needs for what it's intended for is really crucial for here. And here, a robust data catalog that has those kind of features is really what's going to enable this. So here's a couple of quick steps that you may want to look at when you have that technology in place, is identifying the data assets that bring the most value to your business. Identify who owns it or who uses that data. Obviously, having the tool to capture and curate that data and democratizing that data across an organization to bring value to everyone and breaking those data silos plays that crucial role in this step. And then, as I mentioned, democratizing that data. Really, that's where you're going to bring the value to the whole organization, is allowing everyone to understand what data is available. Is it trustworthy? Can it be, and can I use it immediately? Or how fast can I use it to bring that ROI to your organization? So these are the benefits that data discovery, particularly supported by a data catalog, can bring to your organization. And then data governance, not everyone's favorite, but unfortunately is something that I would say it is required. Obviously, it can't stand by itself. It can't stand there without data literacy. It can't be there without data leadership, and it can't be there without discovering the technology to support it. But it has to be part of this. It's why it's part of this maturity model. But in order to have effective data governance, you have to have your safeguards for your data, because it's going to unlock that potential for growth going forward. It's going to allow you to put the policies in place and ensure that that data is both governed, has the right quality, has the right access to it, et cetera, and the right roles and responsibilities around it. So really quick introduction into data governance is the definition of data governance maturity really is the degree which an organization has established effective policies, frameworks, processes, roles, and responsibilities. And this varies obviously by organization. Importance for organizations. It enables improved data quality. We've talked about that a little bit. Security, compliance, better decision-making, and increases ROI because it ensures that those data investments have the right processes in place, have the right policies in place. And then that journey to maturity is around defining those roles, creating that data-centric culture, and implementing and enabling technologies that is going to ensure the success of that maturity. So you could see how data governance really ties in with all the other aspects of literacy, very heavy component of that, ties in with leadership and ties in with that discovery component as well. So quickly, what does the journey look like? And like I said before in the other journey, this is not a rule of thumb, but it's something to guide you. This can obviously, more steps can be added, less steps. You can move these steps around, but from my experience, usually the first step is defining that operational model, the roles and responsibilities. Also, I didn't write here, but also understanding the current state of your organization and where you want to be. The target is part of that step one. Step two is, once you have that understanding, is developing policies around that. Step three is having the tools, and this point would be having the tools in order to curate the business and the technical metadata, so you understand what language is out in your organization. Is it a common language? Is it curated? Is it properly defined, et cetera? And that's where that step three would follow from step one and two. Step four is cultivating the data stewardship culture. So I would say stewardship is part of that step one as well, where you understand who the stewards are, but developing and cultivating it, that data stewardship culture really is aligned with a data literacy component here. Both of those are very tied into this step. Step five, communicating that and providing change management approach and methodology to your organization. As you introduce a lot of this governance, you're going to have that aligned. And this is also a place where literacy plays a huge role in that step five. And then measuring the effectiveness. This is where your KPIs come in. This is where how you plan to measure the success of your program comes into play. And I'm going to turn it over to Aaron just to talk a little bit about a success story that we've had that they've had with this maturity model and with Alation itself.
Thank you, Sal. So I'll be very brief, but ultimately, one of our customers, one of the first to use our maturity assessment, they were a solid customer, been a customer for, as you can see, over 4 years. They had a very decent amount of usage, but what they were seeing was that they were kind of plateauing with growth. So they'd had pretty good curation from both business and technical metadata. They'd seen very good value, and they've gone up on stage and spoken about how happy they were with Alation as a catalog and all of those things. But then they obviously get to a point where they say, well, what's next? Because you don't want things to stay stagnant. You don't want your total users to stay the same unless you're at 90% usage of the entire organization. So what they did was we used the maturity model with them, and we went through those questions, and what they found was search and discovery they were really good at. Data governance they were really good at, because they built the people, the process, the routines. They were using Alation to enhance all of those things. But what they started to see was that they wanted to focus for the next kind of 6 months on leadership and literacy. And those literacy things were kind of key. So leadership was the kind of the top level statements, again, to get people to want to participate. So the why and the what's in it for them type of discussions. And then the literacy did those things such as those skills assessments to understand what would somebody in this team need to be able to do to actually go away and be able to interrogate the data themselves. And then naturally then that meant further training and then education training sessions fitting into how Alation as a catalog is going to help them be able to answer questions about data to then be able to go on to use data to create insights. And ultimately they went from kind of about 1,200 users monthly to over 2,800 in a 6 months basis, just based on the action plan that was created from that maturity model there. And on the deck, you can see there's a link to kind of a story on our blog going through kind of a recap of kind of the actions that they took and so on from there as well.
Thank you, Aaron. And so what's next? So Aaron alluded to what are the next steps that we need to take. So I wanted to start real quick with a very quick saying by Albert Einstein: life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. So that is in essence what you need to do when you get started on this, is not stop. And so what we recommend is the first step is to review and socialize the model. So we're going to give you a link at the end of this slide deck where you can go right to the model and actually do your own maturity assessment. It's a website, it's an Alation site, and so you can go in there and assess where you're currently at within the Alation's data maturity model. So that's the first thing we recommend. Second is implement and communications plans and engage with your communities. These will be key for your success as you move forward. Understanding both where you're at, what plans you make to communicate and implement training specifically around literacy, around personas, and then how you're going to engage them with that training to improve where you're currently at in your maturity are three keys that we believe will really push you along and ensure your success as you move forward. And last but not least, we're going to talk a little bit about Alation and Data Meaning and what we bring to the table for you.
Thank you. So obviously we've spoken about people and process a lot. We are the technology that facilitates that within the cataloging space. So we've been around for over a decade now. Obviously, we were built pretty quickly. We were recognized as being leader from Gartner, Forrester, and so on, credited with kind of starting the machine learning catalogs as a sector. So not just kind of traditional technical metadata management tools, kind of bridging the gap between business, technical, and compliance metadata, and obviously all of the kind of the machine learning, which 10 years ago wasn't being spoken about. Obviously, if you speak about ML and AI now, obviously everyone gets very excited, but Alation has been kind of credited with being kind of the initiator of that as a trend within the catalog space. And then just from there, just a series of customer success stories. As you can see there, 40% of the Fortune 100 using Alation now. A rare success story with both Snowflake and Databricks recognizing us as Data Governance Partner of the Year at the same time. So obviously often seen as competitors, but when it comes to cataloging, kind of recognize kind of our strengths across the board. And more importantly for us, just continually seeing our customers become more and more successful, getting multiple use cases, multiple business units, not just talking about the theory of why a catalog can be successful, but those success stories, as we could see with Sainsbury's going up to 2,800 monthly active users coming in, searching, finding answers about data and creating insights faster, effectively.
Thank you, Aaron. Very quickly, Data Meaning, we completely support Alation in terms of we're a certified partner of Alation. We've implemented Alation. We also are certified both from Right Start and from a data governance approach. We also include within our stack in terms of services, we provide services around data governance, data management, data quality, conversions, architecture, security, and analytics. We play in all the spaces of infrastructure that Aaron has mentioned, where with Databricks, Snowflake, Azure, and AWS. We also very fluent in terms of enabling and training based on data literacy, personas, technology certification programs, etc. So that's a little bit about Data Meaning. And with that, this concludes the presentation. There's a link here both to an email to me, but also to Alation Maturity Assessment that you can use, that you can take you right to the maturity assessment so you can start on that journey. At this point, let's see, Yvonne, are we taking any questions? We have time for that?
Sure. So, okay. Sorry. Yeah, we have. So thank you everyone for attending. Yvonne has posted the link to the assessment in the chat. So feel free to go and take it, see where your organization is going right now, and you know, where kind of the next steps are going to be. Very happy, you know, that we had this chance to kind of like talk about, you know, the steps involved, because I know like for me as a product marketer, this has been a very very new concept to be talked about in this manner, and then kind of seeing it blossom and be extended, you know, over the last year has been really, really great. Do we have any questions from the audience? We have a little bit of time for Q&A, so go ahead and put your questions in the chat. And we'll just, you know, we'll give it a few minutes. Definitely, thank you, Aaron and Salvador, for sharing those insights. It was really informative. I helped put together some of the messaging on this, and I still like learned a lot from just listening. So
Thank you, Dave.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we're not seeing any questions come through, but that's totally fine. I think everyone's just in stunned silence. So we'll be sharing out the recording of this webinar later. And so make sure to, you know, share it with your teams. And thank you very much for, oh, wait, here we go in the Q&A. Oh, for some reason chat was disabled, but we do have a Q&A bit. All right, so we do actually have a question. How do you persuade people who are scared or skeptical about BI, new technologies, or proper data governance?
Big question. I'll tackle some of it, and then I'm sure Sal will add some further thoughts as well. So, I think how to tackle proper data governance. You'll see that Alation, we use what we label as active data governance, and that typically aligns with Robert Siner's book on non-invasive data governance. And what that ultimately means is find people who are doing parts of governance, whether they call it governance or not. And the big examples we see there are, I've never worked at an organization when somebody is new and they don't ask questions around what does this mean? What does this acronym stand for? And either write it down in a notepad or a Confluence page or a OneNote or whatever it is. The scenario there is they are building a business glossary for one person. So the story should be they are building a governance process for one person. Find those people who suddenly take it away from, I did it for myself, so now I share it with my team. Find them and then share it with a bigger audience in a standardized tooling to get more value from it. And then the exact flip side, so obviously that's very business metadata centric. The flip side on the technical metadata perspective, in a very similar vein, how many people in a BI team or a data warehouse team or whatever has built some type of data dictionary for the most queried tables or the questions that the tables that they get asked the most questions about, and then they do some type of process which dumps data dictionaries into a spreadsheet or a SharePoint or Confluence again, and they add table definitions to those things. Again, the scenario there is they are doing parts of data governance, but without that standardized process, without the centralized mechanisms to make that available to more people. So we use that as kind of that initial messaging to try to get them to see that these types of things probably happen today, but without the correct people and process.
I would only add to what Aaron has said. Aaron's absolutely correct. I would only add the people that are giving you the most trouble, actually have a conversation and have them walk them through what they do in their work with data and ask them do they take any steps in terms of personal steps in terms of they have personal controls on that data? Like, how do they decide if the data is good? What steps do they take to ensure that? Because as Aaron said, people are already doing data governance, they just don't realize it. And sometimes with a simple conversation, they can really expose what those governance steps or controls that they may already be using, but they may not be calling it that. So.
Excellent. We have another question here from David Sessler. Do you recommend net new data steward FTEs or change existing roles to encompass that work?
If you have the money, I hire, but if you don't, then it's usually a budgetary reason that you need it. I would find the people that most work with the data the most because they're already doing stewardship. So whoever's working with that data specifically the most is you're more than likely going to be your stewards. They're going to know the best what the data is within the context that it's being used in. And that's where I would start. And at that point, you probably wanted to recruit them some way to take on that role. Obviously, that's going to require conversations, and it's going to require working with your HR departments to ensure that's part of their job role, because they're going to want to be at the end of the year when they're doing assessments on their performance assessments, they're going to want to be graded on that. That's what they're going to be gauged on. So that's how I would pursue that. Aaron, I don't know if you have anything you may want to add to that.
No, I'd completely echo that. I think the reality is that if you're just starting in an organization on a governance program, the reality is that it's going to be incredibly difficult to justify enhanced FTE count just for, I say just in a not my opinion, but that's the way it's often perceived, is that it's just for a data steward, and what value does a steward add? And it kind of also kind of falls on kind of the last statement that we made around people are doing parts of governance today. So the data stewards really are the people who are doing things through necessity today. So those people who are creating business glossaries on notepads or Confluence pages, people who are making data dictionaries on Confluence and so on from there. If we can identify those people, in reality, most of the times they become at least the initial wave of stewards.
Excellent. Well, I think that's all the questions we have now. Thank you both for your time. This has been so great, and I'm eager to see what kind of assessments people fill out, and how we can see people start to replicate that success we saw at Sainsbury's. Again, we'll be sharing the recording later this week, so keep an eye out for that. Share with your teams, and thank you everyone for your time, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.